So this is your end of unit assignment for the Most Dangerous Game short story that we read. What you need to do is, first of all, make sure that you have this written in your green language notebook. Some of you weren't here when we did this. It's very important and because it explains the plot. So if you haven't been here for the whole time when we read the story, if you haven't been here for many of the notes, this explains the plot of The Most Dangerous Game, the story that we read. And then this will help you to answer the questions after. So I know the glare from the lights is a bit bad, but like I say, if you haven't written this down, you need to do that. So at the very bottom left-hand corner, it says intro. So in the introduction to the story, Rainsford and Whitney are traveling to Brazil on a yacht in the Caribbean Sea. The catalyst, so the event that starts the action, this is the event that if it had not happened, the rest of the story would not have happened. So the rest of the story depends on this event happening, and that's Rainsford falls off the boat. If Rainsford had never fallen off the boat, he never would have gone to the island, he never would have met Zaroff, he would have been fine hunting jaguars in Brazil with his friend Whitney. All right, and then usually after the catalyst or after events in the plot, you'll have these mini conflicts. Now, there's a larger conflict, the main conflict of the story, but then within the story, you're going to find smaller conflicts, smaller problems that need to be solved. So when Rainsford falls off the boat, he has to fight against the sea in order to survive. So that's man versus nature. And then, so he gets to the island, he meets Zaroff, and then that's the rising action. So these are actions that increase the tension of the story as the plot, as you can see, climbs towards the climax. So Zaroff forces Rainsford to be hunted. And then you've got another mini conflict. When Rainsford is in the jungle, hiding from Zaroff, he is facing himself. He's trying to keep himself calm, he can't panic. So that's Rainsford versus his fear. Rainsford then lays 3 traps, and you can look through the story to see what those 3 traps are. And then they don't work, but at the same time, Zaroff doesn't find him. So then it's Rainsford versus the pack of dogs, because of course Zaroff lets off the entire pack of dogs and they're chasing Rainsford through the jungle. He's just wildly running. And then he reaches a cliff. He can see Zaroff's castle across from the bay, but he's on a high, high cliff and he jumps into the sea. And then Zaroff has assumed that Rainsford has killed himself rather than be found, and Zaroff kills him. So he goes back to his castle and he's sad because he lost one of his dogs. He's sad because one of the traps killed Ivan. He's sad because he didn't get to kill Rainsford. He feels like he didn't lose the game, but I guess it was kind of like a tie for him, so the satisfaction wasn't there. And then he goes to bed, and that's when we hit the climax of the story, because Rainsford has been hiding out in Zaroff's bedroom. He swam across the bay. We already know he's a good swimmer because he swam all night after falling off the boat. So that was previously established in the story. And he and Zaroff fight to the death. And we know who wins that fight because the very last line of the story tells us that Rainsford was now sleeping in Zaroff's bed. All right, so that's a really quick review of the story, but what you need to do is, first of all, make sure you have this written in your green language notebook. Then you need to get the assignment sheet. And we've done this before. This is exactly the same kind of assignment sheet that we did for Call of the Wild and for Freak the Mighty. So you've got part 1 and part 2, and then your final task. It's the same kind of thing. What do you think questions? So grade 7, you need to do 4 questions from part 1 and 2 questions from part 2. Grade 8s, you need to do 5 questions from part 1 and 3 questions from part 2. Everybody has to do the final task. And so, you need to get this paper, you need to answer these questions in your green language notebook, and then you need, of course, a blank paper to do the final task. These are exactly the same kinds of questions that you've already seen. They're all what do you think questions, but you do need to have evidence from the story to back up your opinion. So tell what you think, but then you have to explain why you think that. When you're done part 1, you're done part 2, you're done the final task, then you can hand that final task in to Kenny. Keep your green language notebook though, because of course you're going to need it next week for the rest of your assignments.